I've struck gold. I have found the basis for my perfect DAWless setup, at least for now, and I want to share my formula with you all. But first, who am I to tell you what the perfect DAWless setup is? I don't even know you. Well, chances are we've been through a similar process. If you're anything like me, you really like synths, samplers, electronic music hardware, effects, musical toys, and you're constantly looking for the best way to set up your home studio. I've personally been messing around with various arrangements of a relatively portable home studio for the past 5 years or so, and this is the version that I've currently settled on that seems to be the most concise, consistent, and capable. We'll break this down by each instrument and talk about each one's purpose so you can get an idea of how I'm using everything in the bigger picture. And perhaps you can start brainstorming alternatives of what might work for you in this context. Definitely let me know down in the comments if you have any modifications you'd make to my setup or if you have a similar setup yourself. And really, think of this as kind of a formula like I mentioned before. This can be implemented in any way that you'd like. I'm just showing you what I use within the parameters that I've established. So here's my formula for the setup. So there are 5 units here. You have a synth, a sampler, processing and arranging, effects, and finally mixing. Easy enough, right? The great thing about this list is that it's super flexible depending on your needs, and there are a lot of devices out there that can perform multiple roles of these 5 tasks, and some that can kind of do them all in one. So you can stay super minimal with this if it's your cup of tea. I just think it's a good 5 key roles to keep in mind when you're establishing the purpose and what you want to actually do with your DAWless setup. So let's talk about my personal setup now, and I'll talk about how I use each thing to perform those roles that I mentioned. Also, I have a bit of a channel update that I'm going to talk about at the end of the video, so stick around for that if you're interested. The first thing in my signal chain is the Elektron Digitone. The Digitone is really an incredible little synth. It's an 8-voice FM synth with 4 separate sequenceable tracks, and the Digitone integrates super well into this rig because it can be as powerful as you want it to be. You can get some really gnarly, crazy experimental patches by parameter locking every parameter every which way if you want, or you can keep things simple and play a bunch of sine waves. But you're not going to want to do that because it's really easy to kind of mold and shape sound. And once you start to wrap your head around FM synthesis and how the parameters interact, it's really easy to make some really interesting, unique stuff. It does implement some features of subtractive synthesis that make it a little bit more approachable. For example, the filter section that it has is really versatile and pretty high quality in my opinion. It also has a pretty crazy arpeggiator, which can kind of be treated as a mini sequencer within the sequencers themselves. I've got a lot of tunes on the channel recently that feature the Digitone, and I have a full review of it too, which you can check out somewhere, and I'll also put the link in the description. But yeah, it's perfect for being my only dedicated synth in my setup. It's really great. I will continue to grow into it for many years to come. Oh, and the key step here, I'm not really going to talk about that, but I just use it to control the Digitone so I can play it with a keybed. Not that I need it because I can't play piano for shit. All right, next up on the list is the sampler, and I use the Elektron Digitakt. Are you sensing a pattern here? To be completely honest, the Digitakt is the whole reason I started this channel. I got it about 1.5 years ago, and throughout the learning process, I had so many of these little aha moments that I just really wanted to sort of share my process of learning the device. It just brought me so much excitement. I really just wanted to kind of talk about it to anybody who would listen. And there are about 4,000 of you now, so that's pretty cool. So the Digitakt has 8 monophonic sample tracks that can be sequenced in 64-step patterns, pretty much just like the Digitone. There's a reason I use the Elektron boxes together, and it's because they just work so seamlessly together. Like, as somebody who loves music technology as much as I do, I'm relatively tech illiterate, and I haven't had any issues with setting up MIDI between the different Elektron boxes. So if you're smart enough to learn how to use an Elektron device, you're smart enough to figure out the MIDI side of it. So no worries there. And really, any sampler that has the specs that will suit your needs is going to work in this context for your own setup. Again, just think about how it will integrate into the system as a whole, and think about what you want to do in terms of MIDI syncing. I personally like the Digitakt because I'm comfortable with the workflow. I like all the flexibility with parameter locking and sound locking per step. And for the better part of a year, I really used it as a standalone device, as sort of an all-in-one groove box. So if you want to take the minimal approach, the Digitakt can really be flexible if you want to take the time and energy into pushing it. My next category is processing and arrangement, and this is kind of a bit of a wild card, and you don't necessarily need a separate device for this. Like I mentioned, even the Digitakt can be an all-in-one kind of solution if you want a really minimal setup. And especially with my setup, could I get by with just the Digitakt and the Digitone? Yeah, for sure. Does the Octatrack add value for me in terms of audio routing flexibility, live effects processing, additional sample tracks, long-form sample playback, live recording, looping, and general mangling of audio? Yes, it does. Again, I don't have anything particularly new to say about the Octatrack in this video because it's a very complicated beast in and of itself. But it's really added a lot of value to my workflow and how I approach the Elektron devices in terms of dedicating a specific task. Because the Octatrack is so flexible, it allows me to really get specific with what I want to use the Digitone and the Digitakt for, respectively, and then use the Octatrack for whatever's missing. Recently, I've been using it to process incoming audio and also to record guitar loops and passages into to save as samples, to chop up and slice later to integrate into beats. And sometimes I just use it as a big extra Digitakt, which is a lot of fun, totally fine, and not a waste of the device. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So yeah, the Octatrack adds flexibility. I have everything routed through it so I can process the audio and do live effects. And it's also just kind of like a central hub. The Digitakt is my brain, it's sending all of the MIDI, but the Octatrack is sort of the heart. It kind of provides the context and the feeling of the music. So it's cool to think of it as kind of like a heart and a brain situation. And I guess that makes the Digitone the blood? Anyways, it just makes sense for me to use all three of the devices in the specific way that I have their responsibilities laid out. Some people might find more value in syncing up two different all-in-one devices. For example, the Digitakt and the Deluge. I've seen that combo a lot on Instagram recently, and people can get a lot out of it. They seem to like to use the Deluge as the brain of the operation, the sort of out-of-the-box DAW. And then the Digitakt is delegated to sample playback, lots of drums or one-shots or just noise sources. So there's a lot of flexibility here, and I like to use the Octatrack as my wildcard processor and arranger. So, effects. This is kind of the newest part of my tabletop setup that I've been trying to build out. And honestly, the most challenging part of this is physical space. I have my guitar rig off to the side here, which I don't keep permanently routed into my setup, honestly, because I just need to rework my outlet situation. But I love having the pedals available for both synth and guitar when I want to experiment with them. As for my current synth rig, all I have is the microcosm. And I'm specifically implementing that with the Digitone because it's just like a perfect combination. I made a whole video on that and I have a sample pack. If you're interested in checking that out, you can head to my Patreon. And yeah, I just have the Digitone running into that before it hits the Digitakt. And I haven't really implemented any other pedals, primarily because I don't have any other stereo pedals, aside from the Mercury 7, which is a reverb unit, but all of the devices have reverb on them, so I haven't found a need for it yet. Anyways, at least in terms of synths, stereo in effects is really important to me. So I've also pre-ordered the Chaseless Audio Generation Loss version 2. If you're not familiar with the pedal, it's an incredible pedal that has existed in many different form factors, all of which are really great. And it seems like this is going to be the version that contains everything that's been amazing about all of the prior versions, plus so much more. So yeah, just the microcosm for now. Might need to figure out some more table space as I continue to add more effects, which I definitely do. Especially having the flexibility to like run the Digitone through the microcosm, but then maybe have both the Digitakt and Digitone hit the generation loss before they're fed into the Octatrack would be super cool. So the last step is mixing, and I'm really not going to spend too much time here. I personally use the 1010 Blue Box, which I've talked about quite a bit on this channel, and I primarily use it to route audio throughout my studio so I can get it to my computer, headphones, and monitors all at the same time. And size-wise, it's just a really good solution for me. I don't have a lot of space, and it works. It also allows me to keep the effect sends and such on my Elektron devices free for use if I want to use them for that. So it's great that it just kind of, allows me headroom for inputs and outputs within my setup. I could use the Octatrack as a mixer, but I had the Blue Box before the Octatrack, so it is what it is. Also, just a quick rundown of the signal path I have at the moment. We have the Digitone running into the microcosm, and then I'm mixing that audio out into the Digitakt. And then I have both of those going into the Octatrack as a single through machine. I should probably do two separate outputs for more control, and I'll definitely set that up sometime soon. And as I mentioned, all of that is running into the Blue Box. So yeah, that's my setup. Now I want to talk about room to grow, and I would love your feedback here, because yeah, it's an endgame setup, but I'm always learning and growing and trying to develop new sounds and explore a bit as a musician. And as you know, the gas journey never truly ends. One thing I'll definitely be picking up, probably sooner rather than later, is the Korg Minilog XD. This has honestly been on my list for like 2 or 3 years by now, and I'm not sure why I haven't gotten one. I picked a Digitone up in favor of it last year, just because of its integration with the Digitakt, but I've really just wanted a standalone subtractive synth. I just know what type of sounds I want to get from it, and I know how to achieve those with subtractive synthesis, and I just want it. So that would obviously add to the synth role in my setup, but I've also been looking into some desktop saturation units, particularly the Elektron Analog Heat and the Auto Devices Boom. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I've done a lot of research on both. I just need to kind of figure out which one's character I'm more aligned with, and maybe pick that up sometime down the road. I don't really think I'll get it anytime soon. It's definitely not necessary, but I think it would just add a lot of character and personality to the audio in my setup. And it's fun to kind of think about and do research. And lastly, I've been reading up and watching a ton of videos about the Synth deluge. I don't know why, but something about it is just so appealing to me, especially recently. It seems like a perfect combination of the sort of playfulness and interface and functionality of the OP1 and something like the Digitakt, but more focused on clip launching. I honestly think it would be best to have as a piece of gear to use outside of my primary setup, the same way I kind of use the OP1 now, except my OP1's battery has been having some issues and doesn't really hold a charge, so I have to keep it plugged in, which kind of defeats the purpose of it being a portable device. I was using the OP1 before any of this stuff, but since I've become very comfortable with the sequencing-based workflow, I think that the Deluge would kind of have that same role that the OP1 did before I got any of this stuff, and would be a perfect standalone portable groove box for me. It would just be an absolute joy to travel with, to jam with on the porch, in bed, at the dentist, wherever. So yeah, should I get a Deluge? Should I get a Minilog XD? What do you like to use in your DAWless setups? How many mistakes have you made? How much debt are you in? All right, and for those interested, I just wanted to give a quick channel update. So last week we hit 4,000 subscribers, which is super exciting. They say subscriber count is meaningless, but it really does help with the dopamine. So I appreciate each and every one of you. And if you're still here and you're not already a subscriber, definitely think about subscribing. All of that stuff really does help with visibility and growing the channel. So as annoying as it is, there's a reason people say it all the time. But yeah, thanks for sticking around. I'm excited for what's to come. And I'll think of something cool to do for 5,000 subscribers. That'll be kind of a bigger milestone. Another fun update for you is I'm actually kind of starting this as a part-time job. I still have a full-time job. I've just restructured my schedule to work 4 10-hour days, and now I have 1 day a week that is solely dedicated to making content for the channel, working on music, and doing all that stuff that goes along with it. I've always had so much fun putting together all of this content for you all. It can be kind of tiring though to kind of squeeze in an hour of it or 2 hours here and there every night of the week and to take up time on the weekends to work on it. I felt like a rate limiting factor has kind of become the amount of time I'm able to put into the channel all at once. So I'm really excited to be able to have a dedicated day every single week to work on things. I'm considering different options, maybe putting out 2 videos a week, or perhaps just trying to learn more about video production and really ramping up the production value for you all. So let me know which one of those things you find more valuable, because I have fun doing this and I just want to make the experience as enjoyable for you all as I can. And along with that, in terms of supporting the channel, every little bit does count, and especially now that I'm making a push to try to make this more of a thing, like a real thing. If you've ever considered supporting the channel monetarily, now is definitely the best time to do so. There are a ton of different perks over on my Patreon, and I'm definitely open to feedback too. If there's anything that you're interested in that would get you excited about becoming a regular patron, let me know. And yeah, just generally, is there anything you'd like to see more of on the channel? I want to try to get my hands on some more instruments. If you guys want to do reviews or like basic tutorials on other devices, I'd really enjoy kind of expanding my own horizons and learning new devices and just basic workflows from other companies whose gear I haven't used. It's fun to teach and it's fun to learn, and it always gives me new ideas even in my own workflow that I have now. So yeah, just give me a holler if there's anything that you'd be interested in seeing me review or teach you about. Anyways, that's really all I wanted to talk about. So yeah, appreciate and love each and every one of you. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you next week. Peace.